Hey everyone, this is Chris.
And Lorenzo.
And welcome to our Best of Saturday series. Now that we have hundreds of episodes, we get a lot of listeners asking us where to start.
So we'll be selecting some of our most popular episodes to share each Saturday from our years of podcasting. We hope you enjoy it.
No role plays, just real. Chris and Lorenzo share 4 decades of combined experience to help you become a more effective leader.
We've never really, as a workforce, spent a lot of time on making sure we're developing good leaders.
We'll be able to share stories, experience, mistakes, failures, successes.
This is Hacking Your Leadership.
Welcome to Hacking Your Leadership. I'm Chris.
And I'm Lorenzo.
And Lorenzo, yesterday I was reading through LinkedIn and found an article on Inc.com by a LinkedIn influencer by the name of JT O'Donnell, and she has, a couple million followers. And the article really struck me. I liked it a lot, in part because of the content, but in part because of some underlying messages in it. And I want to read you a little excerpt of it, and then kind of get your thoughts and talk about what you think. Okay?
Cool.
The article is called "My Boss Has a Silly Unwritten Dress Code." Okay.
Okay.
And there's 2 paragraphs. The first paragraph is titled Employee Point of View. And she says, I work in a department with 15 people. I started around the same time with 7 of them, and 3 of them got recently promoted. When the boss announced their promotions, he stressed how much they looked the part of their new roles and commented on how their client-facing and business-minded attire was so great. And so several of the other employees chatted afterwards, and they thought that the promotions were because those people dressed like him. And he's more of a suit and tie kind of guy, more of a, more professional type of guy. But the dress code around the office is casual. And that's what the kind of company culture is. And so she's saying promotions should be based on the quality of your work, not what you wear. Besides, I'm not going to be a kiss up like those other employees just to please him. And so that was the first paragraph, titled Employee Point of View. The next paragraph is titled Manager Point of View. And it says, I recently gave promotions to several employees who have been really standing out in their work. They're clearly career-minded. They look like they're going places. They stood out to me because of how they dressed. Their power dressing plays a role in success. I tried to tactfully explain that to the rest of the team. I swear they look like they just rolled out of bed and came to work. They take no pride in their appearance. And then she asks who's at fault. And it's interesting. I like how it's written from 2 different points of view, because we rarely get that nowadays in business. We only have our own point of view. So I'm wondering if you have any initial thoughts on that, and then I have some things I'd like to add too.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think just in hearing it initially, it feels like the leader has an expectation of how people should show up for work in regards to, in this case, dress code, but they have kind of an unwritten expectation that they haven't shared with anybody. And I think you can hear that in both the employee comments and the manager or the leader comments. Sure. Where, the team members saying like, I'm looking at this and these people have dressed up and then they get the job, but our dress code is casual. So I don't understand. Is there something here that I'm missing? And, are they trying to look like them? And the perspective, of course, from the leader is such that he feels that there's value in dressing up, and that represents not just the individual and their commitment to work, but the customer facing element of that is very important to him. So my initial gut reaction is I think it's a little bit unfair. I think it's if you want people to, regardless of what the policy is, if there are certain things, because many policies allow there to be room for gray areas or for some of them to be subjective. So as a leader, if there's something that I want to make sure is important to me, or that I feel is something that will help, bring value to our clientele, our customers, or represent our brand in a better way, I need to talk about that as a leader and let people know that up front, so that I'm not utilizing this, time to promote other people as a teaching lesson for everybody else.
Yeah, I agree. And actually, the first thing I thought of when I read this article was the episode we did a week and a half ago on vision, clarity, and support, and how we talked about what clarity actually means, and how you can make all the assumptions in the world, but there's nothing that replaces being perfectly clear on what your expectations are. And when I see this, what it looks like to me is that the manager almost wanted people to dress nicer, not because they thought that's what he wanted them to do, but because that's just what they decided to do on their own. So it was less about rewarding the result and more about rewarding the motivation. Like he wanted to reward people who took it upon themselves to follow and emanate the values that the leader was living. And that's fine when it comes to things like empathy and emotional intelligence and stuff like that. If you're leading with values, you don't necessarily have to be clear with your people that this is what you're doing. It shows in your actions. But when you're changing the responsibility of the employee in terms of what is needed in order to advance with a company, the expectation of clarity becomes much, much higher for the leader than just something that is a nice to have.
Yeah, no, I agree, and I think too, when you think of who's at fault here, while my initial gut reaction is that a leader should be able to be transparent and share, basically how they're measuring success or how they're, thinking of the value that everybody brings. I also think there's a part of this that falls a little bit on the shoulders of the employee, where if you're looking to advance your career, if you're looking to grow, if you have career aspirations, and we've talked about this in previous episodes, it is partly up to you to go have that conversation with the leader, and say, hey, I'm looking to move up here. I want to make sure that the work that I'm doing is the right work. I want to make sure that the results that you're looking for, I'm delivering on and, potentially exceeding them. What other things should I be thinking about or doing, or would you like to see for me to be a viable candidate for any other future opportunities with the organization? So I think by doing that, you open the door to then find out if there are any of these things that maybe are a nuance of the leader, or that they feel strongly about but have not expressed themselves or communicated effectively throughout the entire team or the organization. So there is a part of that if you really have some career aspiration, I think it's important that you go seek that clarity. At the same time, it's important that leaders make it a even playing field by telling everybody exactly what the rules are and what they're thinking, what they strongly believe is necessary for everybody to move forward and go into a new position.
Yeah, the thing that troubles me about that is that given how the manager POV is presented on where he said, I tried to tactfully explain that to the rest of the team when I announced the promotions, meaning he didn't explain it up front. Right. He explained it as the reason why the promotions happened the way they did. And now, at this point, there's nothing the employees can do about it because the decisions have been made and they're done. Trying to tactfully explain something, what that means is it sounds like he was uncomfortable just saying it. He was uncomfortable trying to say, hey, you guys look like slobs. And obviously, he wouldn't say it that way, but he was uncomfortable saying you guys look like you just rolled out of bed and came to work, because he understands that the company policy or dress code is casual, that this particular leader is the one that is different than the norm. And when a leader is coming from that perspective, I don't know that leader would be as likely to answer the question that you posed. Like if you were the employee who came in and said, hey, I'm doing my best to advance here, what else could I do? I don't know that this leader would have said, you know what, you could try dressing differently. It sounds like this is the kind of leader who wouldn't have necessarily said that in a one-on-one conversation because of a lack of comfort saying it.
Yeah, I think if we take this example as such, and we say this is where we are today, the promotions have happened, the people have gotten the jobs, and we're moving forward from here. So at this point, if you're the employee, then you take a mental note, and then I think you definitely need to go and have that conversation and to clarify and say, hey, you mentioned while the announcement was happening that that people were dressing the part and that you appreciated that and that type of thing. So I just wanted to kind of clarify what you meant by that. And again, I'm looking to move forward. So is this something that is important to you, important to the organization, something that I can take note of? I think that if he was really fearful of adding a layer above what the company culture or the company policy is, he would have never said in any type of tactical explanation that this is what he was looking at. It's kind of like a softball. Like he's throwing a softball out there, sure, hoping that maybe somebody will bite. But I feel that good luck with that. That rarely ever happens, and it just actually causes people to be probably more frustrated and more upset and be like, well, if this is one thing, like what else is there? How many other times are the next promotion going to happen? And then I got to listen and pay attention to say, like, now what is he looking for? I think you would really have to, as the employee, take the opportunity to go figure this out. I think if this is the time before this announcement happens, I still feel strongly that the vast majority of that falls on the leader, because it's not fair to keep score in a certain category and not tell everybody that you're keeping score there, because it doesn't allow people, because maybe just people may just enjoy dressing up, or the previous job they had or the career they had, that was the expectation. Therefore, that's all they have in their closet, and they wear button-ups every day and khakis, right? Versus somebody else who, maybe this is their second or third job. They came from somewhere else. The company culture says be casual, be yourself, and they're just doing what they feel is the right thing to do. So it's kind of like you have this unfair advantage just simply by what you have in your closet. And I think that is dangerous when it's not something that's being measured by the work that you do every single day.
Right. I think there's two other standpoints that we need to address here. Number one from the employee standpoint and one from the leader standpoint. From the employee standpoint, there's nothing wrong with an expectation that you are doing the job that you want as opposed to just the job that you have. Mm-hmm. So we talk about, promoting leaders. Well, we don't promote leaders who have never had any experience. We start by putting them in situations where they're expected to lead without the title, and we see how they perform and we see what they do. We see basically how they do the job they want as opposed to the job they have. And there's nothing wrong with expecting that. And the dress code kind of falls into that same category. So meaning if the promotion went from a role that was not client facing to a role that was client facing, I think there's nothing wrong with placing that on the employee to say, if you want a specific job, you need to be acting the part. Now, if the promotion was to a job that was also not client facing, then it becomes a little bit harder for the leader to start holding people accountable for that, if what you're holding them accountable to has nothing to do with their current job and nothing to do with how successful they'll do the promotion either. Mm-hmm. Like if it doesn't lead to success versus failure in anything besides how the manager views you, then now it comes to what I want to talk about from the manager standpoint, which is start thinking about your expectations. I mean, this is a podcast about leadership. So if you're a leader and you're listening to this and you have expectations of your team that don't necessarily fall into the purview of what their job expectation, their job description or expectations are, then it becomes incumbent upon you to be crystal clear on what your expectations are. And you need to be thinking to yourself whether or not your expectations are too great. So let me give you an example of why they would be too great. If the company culture, and I'm not saying the dress code, not the written dress code, forget the written dress code. If the company culture is such that says this is a casual environment, if people are coming in slip-on shoes and jeans and t-shirts, and you are the only one, maybe you came from a previous career where you were required to wear a suit, and so now you found this compromise where you're wearing a dress shirt and slacks but no coat anymore, and that's what you're comfortable with. If you're the only person who is like that, then you're the one who's not fitting in with the company culture. You're the one. And if you're expecting your team to dress how you feel comfortable dressing, and that puts them at odds with what the company culture is, assuming it's a healthy company culture and it gets the job done and it's rooted in values and in service of the employee and the customer and the financials. If we can say yes to all those things, then you're the one who's in the wrong, and you should address what your expectations are and really think about how you're fitting in with that culture.
Yeah, I completely agree. And I think another example of where clarity and job descriptions is necessary is many times, you have members of a team who are really, really good at something, and they come in and they're fantastic at that work. They drive a great result or profitability, customer satisfaction, whatever it is, but they're fantastic at that work. And you say, hey, can you help us out? Would you mind taking a couple of people under your wing? Would you mind spending some time helping others, teaching them how you do it, showing them how you do it, giving them some feedback, shadowing them, like all these things? And so basically we say, hey, your job is to drive this result or get these things accomplished. And now what I'm asking you to do is like not do that as much because I need your help to go and make these other people better at their role. And if you're not really clear with making sure they understand that you value both, that you say like, look, not only am I asking you to do this, but I understand that your productivity may go down. So while we may have a way here in our organization of measuring your value on how productive you are, I also want you to understand that I see that, and I'm asking you to do less to be able to help the greater good. Because I've seen it many times where we take really great people who are leading productivity, we ask them to help others, and then a month, 2 months, 3 months down the road, now we want to question why they're not so productive, right? Or we look at a review or we look at a promotion opportunity and they're worried and saying like, well, wait a minute, like I was told that I had to be at the top of this list to get this other job, and now I'm number 4, number 5, I'm in the middle, but I've been spending my time doing what you asked me to do. So I think, to kind of piggyback on your example, it's extremely critical that we're really clear when we ask people to help out and to do something that's not necessarily a part of their job description, when it brings value to the team, and that they understand that when you're the leader, they realize that they're not going to get passed over or missed because they're investing their time in a different way.
Yeah, I completely agree with that. I think it is a failure of leadership in a lot of places, and not intentionally. I think they're not looking 3 steps ahead. They're not assuming that there's going to be a drop in that standing in order to do that. The last thing I want to talk about when it comes to this is the main reason why I enjoyed this article. And that's that it presents the employee point of view and the manager point of view in a way that makes it obvious that both of those people, the employee and the leader, had positive intent, and neither assumed positive intent from the other. And, we've talked about assuming positive intent on episodes prior, and we've talked about clarity. And I think what this comes down to is it's indicative of a lack of a relationship between the leader and the employee to begin with, one that started long before this incident with dress code ever happened. So the dress code is just the latest incident. If I have a great relationship with my employees and I'm the leader, I don't need to find ways of tactfully explaining a message. I can just tell them. Mm-hmm. And if they have a great relationship with me, they would know long before these promotions what the expectations were, either because I told them outright or because they said, hey, we're not clear. What's up here? Mm-hmm. And there becomes this almost shorthand that gets spoken. I mean, the way this article reads is it's indicative of a relationship that is in the professional only, and these people probably don't talk to their leader outside of whatever the discussion about job is. And that's it. And that's what leads to situations like this. So it's easier to assume positive intent in the short term. But assuming positive intent is supposed to get you through the conversation so that you can then seek clarity. It's not supposed to be some place you live in permanently. You're not supposed to have to assume that your manager's doing right by you in the face of overwhelming evidence to suggest otherwise. You're supposed to give them the benefit of the doubt on the first time and then sit down with them immediately and say, okay, what's going on here? With an open mind. It's a lot easier to assume that positive intent under those circumstances than it is if you wait until the 10th or 11th time that you perceive something as being a slight to you, and now you want to talk to them about it. You're more likely to just dismiss them as a terrible leader at that point. And maybe they are, but maybe they have complete positive intent, and you just haven't been clear in your communication either. So I really think that's the underlying message of the entire article is what happens when there's a lack of relationship and a lack of communication between leaders and their people.
Yeah, no, I think it's great. It's a great point. I think you're spot on with the idea that positive intent is in the moment. I'm assuming positive intent, so I don't come at you in a certain way, but right. I'm also seeking to understand. Right, I'm giving you the benefit of the doubt to explain yourself. Right,
right,
and then we can move forward from here versus coming in a negative connotation or an aggressive way. So as as you were mentioning kind of the full result of the article, was there more to the article? Like, was the question answered, or was it just positioned out there for people to think about and discuss?
Yeah, well, I mean, she says at the end what each side can take from this.
Okay.
And she talks about some of the same stuff that we're talking about. The employee takeaway is figure out how you can, emanate the values of your leader, whether it be dress code. In this case, it was dress code, but under any circumstances, if you're an intuitive person, you can know what your leader stands for and what's important to them. You might not be perfectly clear on it if you haven't had the conversation, but there are things you can pick up on. Mm-hmm. And the fact that this is worded this way means that the person who was upset about the dress code leading to promotions, you can tell that person believed that was an expectation already, and they just chose not to. So
Sure.
they opted out earlier and didn't think it would affect their advancement, and then they got upset when it affected their advancement. So there's it's a two-way street when it comes to communication. So absolutely, the employee has a takeaway there, and then the manager takeaway is obviously clarity. It's about making sure that your expectations are clear to your employees. And those are the basic things that lead to a great communicative relationship. They're the prerequisite to a communicative relationship. The relationships that are great are the ones that go beyond those suggestions and that live in that shorthand that exists between leaders and their same people. I was on an airplane last week, and I watched a documentary about Steven Spielberg, and he said something that stuck with me. He said that he's worked with, there's like this group of 30 people that are behind the scenes people, camera people and editors and sound people and production assistants, like 30 people that he's used since the 1970s. And he said that there's no way he could have worked as often as he did, made as many movies as he had, if he had to start over with a new group of people each time. He said that these people, by the third or fourth film, they were working on a shorthand with each other, where they just knew what the expectations were and they executed on it. And there's no way that happens in any leader-employee relationship unless it starts with amazing communication. And the longer you see the positive leadership and the longer you see the positive intent from the employee, the easier that communication becomes.
Yeah, that's great. And I'm super glad that we were pretty much aligned in our conversation with her kind of answer to the situation as well. And with that, it brings us to this episode's 1 Minute Hack.
The 1 Minute Hack.
Okay, for this episode's 1 Minute Hack, if you're a leader, I need you to take a pen and a paper and write down a list of the things that you'd want to see as the qualities and the results of people that you would consider for the next available promotion, the next move up in the system, and write all those things down. And then I want you to look at what the actual culture and the requirements in the company are and see where there's overlap and see where there's not overlap. And if there's anything that is on your list that isn't on the company list of what is included in the job description of either the current role as well as the role being promoted into, then you need to have a direct conversation one-on-one or with the team as a whole on what your expectations are and what you're looking at when it comes to making those promotions. You need to do it early enough on before you're looking for those people to promote so that people can decide on their own to either opt in or opt out. And if they say, if let's giving the dress code issue, I'd rather dress casually and know that I'm not going to be eligible for this next promotion, and I'm okay with that. Or if they're not okay with it, they have no one to blame but themselves. But be clear on that and make sure that you're on purpose. Don't just assume your people know what your expectations are.
Yeah, I think that's a great 1 minute hack. And the idea of taking a minute to self-reflect and realize that there may be many things that are not written in a book somewhere or on a policy or on a job description in regards to what your expectations are as a leader when you're looking for talent, and for new career opportunities. So I think it's a great hack.
The employer of the future is less about policies and more about philosophies. But we're in a transition right now, and policies have been in place for years or decades in a lot of organizations. And it's going to be hard to shake them as a workforce in the short term. So as we transition to a workforce that is more philosophy-based, it's going to become easier to do this because there'll be no other way to express your sentiments besides in being clear with your team. The leaders who rely on that rule book, they're fine. They can rely on that rule book, but then their expectations cannot be above and beyond what that rule book is.
Yep, completely agree. And with that, it brings us to the end of another episode. This is Hacking Your Leadership. I'm Lorenzo.
And I'm Chris.
And we'll talk to you guys next time.